Good evening to everyone, live and virtual, and welcome to Confluence, Dance, Film, and Future Landscapes, a joint event between the 2022 ACDA Screen Dance Festival and the second International Symposium on Screen Dance. My name is Chad Michael Hall, my pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the Screen Dance Festival Coordinator and Chairperson of the ACDA Screen Dance Committee.
Hi everyone, and my name is Kim Brooks-Mata, and I am also a member of the Screen Dance Committee for ACDA, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank our Screen Dance Committee colleagues who are joining us virtually. Lisa Locke, Maureen Kadar, Carrie Burke-Morris, for the many hours of work that they put into our festival this year and for helping make this panel happen. And for those of you who are joining us, we're coming to you live from the historic Margaret Dobler Theater at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, home of the first degree granting program dance in the United States, which is exciting. And we're honored to be here tonight as a part of the second International Symposium on Screen Dance to examine the state of the art of screen dance in higher education.
This event serves as the closing event of ACDA's 2022 National Screen Dance Festival. It's also the opening day of the International Symposium on Screen Dance. We're really excited for this opportunity to bring together students and professionals,
next generation screen dance artists with established artists, scholars, and pioneers in the field as we envision the future of this form. We'd like to offer a big thank you to Douglas Rosenberg and Cal Moore and our panel for making this event possible. We'd also like to offer a big thank you to ACDA Executive Director Diana Fries and Operations and Programs Manager Brittany Ray. Now, I'd like to introduce ACDA President Elizabeth Ahern to offer some introductory remarks.
Thank you. On behalf of the ACDA board, welcome to the closing panel of the second annual ACDA Screen Dance Festival live stream from the International Symposium on Screen Dance at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. These past 2 weekends have certainly confirmed that screen dance is here to stay, and ACDA is committed to continuing our efforts next year as we further our robust return to live conferences in an effort to provide multiple platforms and opportunities for dialogue, scholarship, creation, and presentation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the generous dance artists who shared their experience, knowledge, and expertise through the adjudication process and the many workshops and presentations, and the Screen Dance Committee and board members, as well as Chad Michael Hall, chair of the Screen Dance Festival Committee. And thank you again to the International Symposium on Screen Dance and the University of Wisconsin-Madison for collaborating with us on this event, examining the state of the art of screen dance through the lens of higher education. I will toss it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So to those who may not be as familiar with ACDA, I would like to offer a brief background. The American College Dance Association exists to support and affirm dance in higher education through regional conferences, the adjudication process, and national festivals. The educational mission of the association is to foster creative potential, to honor multiple approaches to scholarly and creative research and activity, and to promote excellence in choreography and/or performance, also to give presence and value to diversity in dance. When the pandemic shut down virtually all of ACDA's programming and activities, the organization immediately got to work in brainstorming new and virtual programming opportunities, and one of these that was born was the Screen Dance Initiative. And in the words of Ann Cooper Albright earlier today, in the sort of punk spirit, we just like got down to business, right? We didn't really exactly have a clear path set forward, but we did have a lot of previous years engaging with screen dance in different ways at our regional conferences, where coordinators would have screen dance showings. We sometimes would have screen dances being adjudicated among stage performances. And we took this as an opportunity to really flesh that out and formalize a process where we could have students, faculty, and guest artists at various member academic institutions come together to share screen dance, to engage in the adjudication process, and also engage in discourse around screen dance in higher ed. And in that pioneering spirit, in April of 2021, the ACDA presented its inaugural Screen Dance Festival. This new direction reflects the organization's commitment to facilitating new ways of knowing dancing bodies in performance and within cinematic spaces. For the second year of the festival, the Screen Dance Committee chose the theme Confluence, Dance, Film, and Future Landscapes, focusing on the multiple streams of dance and film, choreography and cinematography, new generations, and screen dance lineage in the professional landscape with higher education, and examining how and where these ideas, practices, and people converge and come together. So, ACDA seeks to create new opportunities for our students and faculty to expand upon this existing knowledge. And tonight we look to leaders within the field of screen dance to reflect on current practices, share ways in which they see the landscape of the field evolving, and discuss academia's roles in supporting, facilitating, and advancing the field. We're thrilled and honored to be joined tonight by Harmony Bench, Gabri Krista, Omari Carter, Charlotte Griffin, Kara Hagan, Lee Chaoping, and Katrina McPherson. Welcome, panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chad. So before we get started, we'd just like to take a moment to offer each of the panelists a moment to introduce yourselves, because not everyone who's joining virtually will necessarily know how you're working with screen dance within different forms, whether it's creative practice, whether it's in scholarship, whether it's in the making or educating. So we'd love to hear a little bit from each of you to provide some context so that those who are hearing your remarks later will understand from where you're speaking. So if you could each share a bit about your current creative and or scholarly work in screen dance and the different ways in which your research and practice perhaps intersects with higher education. So that's where we're going to start. Gabri, do you mind starting?
No, it's okay. Hi, my name is Gabri Krista, she, her. I have been in the screen dance field for about 20 years, I think, by now, when I started making my first work. I am currently Associate Professor of Professional Practice at Barnard College, where I started the screen dance course. I also curate and started a festival called Moving Body, Moving Image around social justice issues on screen through movement. I say movement because we also do some sports and not just dance. And I'm a maker, a screen dance maker, but also a maker of dance and other media, documentaries, etc.
Thank you. I'm Katrina McPherson. I have been a screen dance artist and director for over 30 years now. I started teaching screen dance pretty much as soon as I started making it, because when I started out, there was no one really teaching it, at least not where I was in Scotland, in the UK. So I have, it's fair to say, probably taught pretty much all over the world. I wrote a textbook or a workbook called Making Video Dance, which was first published in 2006 by Routledge, and then a second edition came out in 2018. I have had a very strong connection with teaching in the States, initially through mainly workshops, but then over the last kind of 4 years I had the really amazing opportunity to take over the reins from Ellen Bromberg at the University of Utah. And initially I devised and delivered the first capstone graduate course there, and then when Ellen retired, took over the graduate course. As part of that, I had started to develop, having been asked by the University of Utah, an undergraduate course in screen dance. But with the pandemic, all the kind of long-term planning had to be, go very, very quickly. So I then delivered those undergraduate courses. I'm now not working at the University of Utah. I'm mainly teaching online and focusing this year particularly on mentoring, so working with artists who are at a more advanced stage in their practice. So I'm delighted to be here.
Hello, hello. I am Omari Motion Carter, and I'm a graduate of the MA in Screen Dance at London Contemporary Dance School, and I am creative director of screen dance production company, the Motion Dance Collective. And I've been making since around 2011. And so my practice kind of looks around hip-hop culture and hip-hop dance practices predominantly, and questioning this word of urban that surrounds us on a day-to-day. So that's kind of like my main work around that. But yeah, with the collective, we're producing, we're creating, we're educating. And yeah, screen dance is just such a big love of mine. And it's one of those things that I think it found me. And it was one of those things as well, as I was growing up as an artist, it was with an industry that was also growing. So it was like, okay, we can grow together through this. And I feel like I found my family in that as well. So, you know, it's nice to be back with the family and having another barbecue once again. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Charlotte Griffin. I'm an assistant professor of dance at the University of California, Irvine. And I teach modern contemporary dance forms and screen dance, dance and technology. I just want to mention, I have notes because I'm a nervous speaker, but I'd like to acknowledge that in 1996 I was a student at the American Dance Festival, which was very formative in my dance and screen dance education, which I believe was the first summer of dance on camera. Yeah, so that was my first exposure to the art form through Doug. And yes, I made my first film in 2007 as a graduate student with significant support from the University of Texas at Austin, and which Doug kindly programmed at ADF. Yeah, and so here we are. I'm grateful for all of the people here because I look to you for resource and refreshment and engagement, and you make it possible to continue making work, supporting the work of our students, and supporting artists. Thanks. That one's easier.
Hi everyone, my name is Li Xiaoping and I'm a professor here at UW-Madison. And I'm primarily a choreographer performer, but learned most of my screen dance on camera from Douglas Rosenberg, who's been mentioned more than a few times. So for about the past 30 years, I've been exploring the form, mainly as a choreographer and a performer, but then branching out also as a director. I've also incorporated the study of screen dance, the creating of screen dance in my choreography classes, and then also as a standalone course, which I taught virtually during the pandemic. And I'm really honored to be here. In the list of leaders, I think of myself more as a fan and an advocate of screen dance, so thanks for having us.
Hi everyone, I'm Harmony Bench, she, they, H. I'm based at The Ohio State University, where I teach across lots of different areas. I'm sure we'll hear more about that. Because Katrina mentioned Ellen Bromberg, I'll just say that I was first exposed to screen dance through Ellen Bromberg at the University of Utah when I was an undergraduate there. And I've actually been participating in this field as a scholar for about 20 years, which is shocking to say out loud. And yeah, the ways I intersect with higher ed in terms of screen dance is typically through my own research practice. As I said, I've been a scholar in this area for about 20 years. Really thinking about screen dance in online spaces, so screen dance that doesn't harken back to an art cinema kind of lineage, and really thinking about the space of the internet, the space of the smartphone, these alternate sites, these alternate screens, where dance and movement and movement composition circulates. I'll leave it there for now.
Hey everyone, my name is Kara Hagen, she, her, they, them, and I'm currently at the University of Akron, and I'm also teaching one of the units for the MA Screen Dance that I took over from Claudia, the Situating Screen Dance course. And let's see, I've been making since 2007, And my introduction to screen dance was actually pop culture, and I still really love pop culture. So like Jennifer Lopez on the Fly Girls, and early MTV, and later MTV, and most specifically Missy Elliott's videos because I love her so much. But also, let's see, I've been directing and curating for ADF's Movies by Movers since 2010. And a lot of my scholarly work is around issues of representation in screen dance, most specifically as they relate to race and gender. And let's see, I think that's it for the moment.
Okay. So last year in 2021, ACDA offered its first round of programming in the festival. And we had 4 workshops, and I said, well, I'll offer the first workshop. I can do an introductory workshop on screen dance. What we discovered when I conducted the workshop is that about half of the people that were there were professors, they were faculty from membership institutions. And we discovered then that there really is a big interest from faculty around the country that are interested in implementing screen dance curricula in higher education, whether it's enhancing existing courses or starting a curriculum, or having some tips to maybe, perhaps they don't have room for a new course, but they can offer a way into a choreography course that's existing already. And so let's start the conversation this evening by discussing how screen dance literacy in the 21st century manifests in college dance curricula. From your perspective, what does screen dance literacy look like? What does screen dance literacy look like? What do you offer? What do you see? What would you like to see? Who would like to start us off?
I can start.
Thank you, Kara.
So I think it's worth mentioning that, of course, when our students come to us, they already have a lot of media literacy, right? So they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on Snapchat, they're doing all of these screen-based work already, and they come with some sensibilities that they bring to the table as it is. They may or may not be sensibilities that we have come up with in the field specifically as they relate to art film, but they do know things. And so I always like to start there. I always start from a place of like, okay, what have you seen? What are you already making? And how can we expand that? And I think from my experience, dance moves really slowly in terms of its development, right? And so when I first entered the academy in 2009 or 10, there really wasn't that much interest. Like I got a lot of pushback. And I was like, well, this is dance. That's screen. We don't need to do that. Not like as a class, like maybe as an elective, maybe we'll let you do it. And I think it was only after the pandemic started that I'm sure that everybody in this room was so ridiculously busy over the pandemic because everybody was like, oh my gosh, actually, we would like you to do something with our students. Thank you. And so that was like, and we were like sitting there this whole time like, yes, we do. Kelly's nodding her head because she knows. And so I think that in a lot of institutions, with the exception of places like the University of Utah, where Ellen has been doing such amazing work for so long, but it took so long, right? With the exception of places like that where it's been happening already, it's been kind of a hard wedge, right? Like trying to create space in curricula people are so incredibly committed to, especially in this time where we're like, we're decolonizing our curriculum. Well, are you really? What does that even mean? Like, okay, so you want to keep your comp class, great, but what are you going to do with it to bring it into the 21st century so it's not the same composition class that you were taking in 1992? Or before, right? Like, much more before. And so I guess all that to say, as I ramble on, is that I feel really ambivalent about it. And that obviously I'm incredibly passionate about the art form, and I want to see it flourish, but I also feel like there's so much foundational work to do as institutions to have that actually happen. And that even being in a place where there is an amazing film school, like, it's like getting people to play in the same sandbox is so difficult, even with all this talk about like, we want interdisciplinary courses. No, you don't. Not really, because nobody's giving anybody cash to do this, nobody's giving anybody course releases, nobody's giving anybody actual space, like physical space, to do these interdisciplinary courses. Not to the degree that the institutions say that they want. So, I don't know. Maybe some of you in this room can, and on this panel can relate, but I find myself a little frustrated in that the way that the institution puts itself forward saying that they want these things is not actually what happens on the ground, and that we keep on having to justify our existence, and that is tiring. But that aside, again, I remain excited about it, passionate about it, and put it in wherever I can.
Anybody else? Sorry. That was kind of a drop the mic. I think we're done.
We can go now.
It seems a bit of a risk, but I'll pick it up. So, yeah, I totally agree. And I think that there's something interesting here in terms of the sensibility that you're talking about, that a sensibility doesn't necessarily translate into a vocabulary, right? There's like an absorption, there's a participation in something, but not necessarily a language or a reflection about how to be proactive in crafting something. I kind of want to push back on the question because I think that screen dance literacies are very similar to other media literacies, and I would say that they actually don't exist. And I would shape it maybe a little bit differently to say that it's one thing to even be literate in a way of like a kind of consumer model, like I'm literate, I can consume, and it's a very different thing to be fluent. I can make, I can shape this in a way that reflects a worldview or a standpoint. So I think that we do have, and I don't want to make like a generational statement because I think it's all of us, but I do think that we are not as reflective or reflexive in our viewing as we could be. And if there's something that I wanted to change about, screen dance in higher ed, it would be taking more opportunities to kind of critically unpack the things that we just encounter, the things that, when we're doom scrolling or whatever it is we do these days, that we pause to really unpack, well, do we understand how a documentary is also crafting a visual argument to persuade you? Do we also understand how these different perspectives are being employed in this screen dance context? And can we actually become fluent? And part of that for me is also recognizing histories, the histories of certain choices in compositional practice, and that those histories are not exclusive to film history. That screen dance and media practices, not all media are film, and not all media histories are film histories. So I think that to get to a place of screen dance literacy, let alone screen dance fluency, we also have to kind of recognize the multiplicity of the histories that are embedded in our various practices.
Thank you. I see folks writing notes down. What are you writing about?
Yeah, I first want to acknowledge that it's so great to be here with everyone. I've met basically everybody for the first time today, and I've been talking to Cara and Katrina and everybody here, reading their work, seeing their work. So I'm also writing notes of wisdom that I hear, so there's that when I'm writing. But I was thinking about academia as this still privileged place, and I think that's where we need to start. Not everybody does get into the academia, can afford it. So the division is already there in class, race, background, popular culture, and brings me back to what Harmony was saying today also in thinking about what forms of dance are the major forms of dance in departments in university, if it's not just modern dance, ballet, and then as an elective African or hip hop, which is still the case in most departments. I was also thinking about how I don't like curriculum. I don't like it. I push back against it. It's very interesting to me that I'm in academia because I've always pushed back against it, and I still do. I think developing curious artists who make conscious choices, who know what their aesthetic is, whether it is they're going to do a tap film or create something that is entirely for hip hop, but have this clear choice making and understanding their place in the lineage and histories of everything that's on screen, not just screen dance as art, but in the vast big screen. So that's what I'm thinking about, and then thinking about how to facilitate and coach that, but not saying and telling them what to do. So give the tools for the sandbox, or the tools for the toolkit, or the crayons for the etc., more so than creating curricula, because that makes me a little bit nervous. Because would we not do the same thing that has then happened in dance, and if it's not following certain rules, it's not screen dance. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I wanted to say, when we were talking earlier today, is then you go into production value and etc., but can we get excited about those students who really just push back against that and don't follow the rules and are pushing us forward? So I don't know if this makes any sense, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to that, because even oh, here we go. Yeah, I was like relating it to kind of hip hop practice as well. Like when we learn any sort of hip hop practice, we learn the rules and then immediately break them, right? We learn the rules in order to break them. We learn what a wave is and then go, right, how can I bring my own individuality or my own character into that? And so yeah, it really just is about like reorientating the students' thinking, like of what they already know, and kind of going, actually, do you realize that you don't have to follow those fads that you see? Especially, I see a lot of hip-hops, especially on TikTok and Instagram. You know, you have the gimbal, and then you have the zoom in and out. Everyone's seen this, right? It's just zooming in and out on the routine, and it just shows that they just haven't had the conversation when they went into that space. And just imagine what happens now if we just have the 30-minute conversation about what the choreography is and how that changes. And I feel like I can see when that's happened in work. And I go, yeah, that's what it is, you know, for me. So yeah, I think especially during the kind of COVID times teaching online, a lot of students weren't able to really have an embodied practice. Like they couldn't film other things that were moving, you know, in their own homes. And I was just dying to get back into the space. And a lot of people were like, oh, screen dance is easy online. You just need a screen and a teacher, right? But it was like, no, being in the space, being able to embody the practice. And I even think back, I always use Katrina and Simon's exercise, eyes open, eyes closed. It's one of my favorite ones. And it's, if you don't know the exercise, basically it's three people. One person's the camera, one person's the camera operator, and one person's the mover. And then the camera operator puts the hands on the back of the camera and says eyes open, eyes closed, and guides them throughout the space. And then you switch throughout those roles. There's no camera involved.
Yeah.
You know, that exercise changed my whole life. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, there's a way to kind of embody things now, and it's so important to be in the space with people, holding cameras, and yeah, there comes a privilege with that. Not everyone even has a phone, you know, like all the time. You know, lots of people do have phones, but then the equipment and all those sorts of things. So I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, that's some of the things, like showing the rules in order to go. It's okay to break them once you know what it is. It doesn't all have to be gimbal. It doesn't all have to be 4K.
Especially the 4K.
Especially the 4K thing.
4K.
Yeah, right. Unless you need to zoom in, okay, we'll stop.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot, quite a bit during the pandemic, has a lot to do with the curriculum, actually, and about how to change things. And yes, it does move slowly. this very question, it made me think about maybe one of the things that's wrong, maybe with academia, is the thought that we are here as more educated people to teach less educated people, or it's sort of to help the illiterate know something more. And I think that in this time period, I feel like listening and respecting other people has been a very, very important lesson. And just from that, I did make a big change to my choreography class, which was not to teach from any of the standard textbooks about composition, but to not necessarily teach theme and variation and all, all those forms, but to just talk about what story do you want to tell. And then we figure out how they individually want to tell those stories. So that's not necessarily groundbreaking or anything, but it was really just to force myself to not do what I've done for the last 20 plus years, to change it. And I didn't have extra time to prepare this syllabus, and I didn't have extra resources. Of course, I'm employed, but I just had to make myself. I felt like it was really important to throw out the old book, the old lesson plan, and start over.
Can I say something? Yeah, there's so many things that I think we all agree about, and I just wanted to pick up on this idea of books. So with Making Video Dance, I never intended that to become a sort of how-to-do book. It was never meant to become a curriculum. It's not meant to be a course. What it was about, for me, was empowering individuals to make their work. And one of the things that I found empowering as a young female artist was to understand technology, to understand processes, and then to be able to take them and use them in the way that myself and my collaborators wanted to do. And I feel that is important, and so I think all these things are absolutely right. I think it's about creating a space for experimentation. It's about recognizing that the people in front of you in any situation are going to be the privileged few that have been able to be there, because there's so many people that can't go into education or can't do workshops, etc. And it's also about saying, understanding what you're working with enables you to move the form, move yourself on, have meaningful collaboration and communication. And I think there's always a danger to sort of saying, well, there's kind of nothing to learn, because learning helps and empowers. But the thing that I think is crucial is two words that I always think about. One is intentionality. So we've got to be really clear as teachers and as people that are providing spaces and opportunities for people, what's the intention, what's the intentionality behind what's happening. And then practice, and that goes back to what Harmony was talking about. I think, and speaking exactly to your question of, how do we fit this into a university or college curriculum, it's about saying, well, amongst all the other things, it needs time. You can't expect people to have to develop a fluency and an understanding on all the different levels that they might want to without the time to do that.
Yeah, I'm just jumping right in, and I think I just want to clarify what I was saying is not like what is the curriculum, or maybe I was speaking more from an artistic point of view, because yes, the tools are there. I use chapters of your book. Thank you so much.
No. It was a pure pleasure to write.
And also, myself learning how to direct the camera, how do I communicate frames and shots, and how does this camera actually work, and how does light work, how does a lens work. Just the tools of a craft, it's also a craft. So I think there's maybe a distinction between what's the craft of filmmaking, because you still need to know what the camera does, how does the camera see that the eye doesn't see, and all those things. How can you translate that? How can you make three-dimensionality, all those things that we'll talk about. And then, so it's almost like tools, like you do your tendus in order to dance, and then you say, I'm not going to do a tendu anymore, and just stand. It's a bit of that, I think, also, and then time, and then learning editing and everything else. So. And I want to just bring up andragogy instead of pedagogy. And I would think everybody knows andragogy. No. Okay, andragogy is adult learning. And what the problem I'm having often with curriculum and pedagogy is that it's for children. And that we still have not evolved in universities to talk about andragogy is with self-directed learning from adults. And so I would really want to change that discussion and start, when can we talk about andragogy, look it up, see what it is, and can we start developing curriculum or learning from that perspective? Because pedagogy is also a little bit about, I'm teaching you this, instead of students thinking, okay, I need to learn this from you, or this is what I seek to learn, if that makes sense.
I just want to add, relates to some of what I'm hearing here. This question got me thinking about student access to and university maintenance of technological tools and equipment. I observed that in 2016, when I taught screen dance at UCI, some of my students had personal phones and laptops, but many borrowed school cameras and worked from machines in university computer labs. But this quarter in 2022 in my screen dance class, all of my students are using personal camera and laptop devices by their choice, and some of those are more powerful than the university offerings. So this requires that the School of the Arts move quickly to change computer lab spaces and selectively acquire technology to loan to students. And I wonder then, do students come to screen dance? Do they come to these classes in higher ed because of prior access to and fluency in technology? And if so, how do we create pathways into screen dance for students without earlier access?
Thanks for that. That's something that I've noticed as well. And just to put this out there, thinking of a quote by Sherry Rabinowitz, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said something to the effect of, if we can't create at the speed at which we can destroy, art is rendered impotent. And every time I read that quote, I'm like, whoa, she's right. Especially now. I mean, I think, Claudia brought up her feelings about the war today. And I don't know if I'm so sorry if I'm bringing this in a totally different direction. But obviously, our ability to tear things down is great. Like, we actually have no trouble with that at all. So why is it so difficult for us to tear down something as simple as a curriculum? It shouldn't be that difficult. You know what I mean? So just putting that out there.
Any other comments on our first topic before we move on? Last words here? Okay.
Wow, so my head was just swimming in how we blow up curriculum more quickly, so that I'm not bringing my real person in, I'm just doing these questions, but I would love to continue to talk as a real person after this. Wow. So we've already started talking, many of you have already started touching upon different platforms and ways of making screen dance that are starting to enter into the making world, and how different generations are beginning to engage with this form. So we were hoping to shift the conversation towards future landscapes of screen dance, thinking about what shifts you've observed in this medium in recent years, which you've begun to address as a result of the pandemic. And then also thinking about how might these shifts lead to new investigations, experimentations, blowing things up perhaps, and how that might inform education, curation, creation, scholarship, either within the academy or beyond. And I hate using the word academy, within educational locations. I'm going to just set this down.
Could I ask you to paraphrase?
Yes.
Could I ask you to paraphrase
Paraphrase.
that maybe in a simple?
Yes. So what shifts have you observed within screen dance in recent years?
Okay.
And then perhaps how might those shifts lead to new possibilities?
No, you go.
Okay.
No, you go.
I might need to go around,
I gotta go around.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one. I was given the opportunity to become a digital creative for a company called Pavilion Dance Southwest in Bournemouth in the UK. And they were asking me, you've got this amount of money, what would you like to do? And it was just after the pandemic had kind of started to loosen. And I just knew I didn't want to make another 2D work on a 2D screen. I felt like the whole world was we were in the split screen era, right? And I think a lot of people didn't really necessarily just want to watch just on a screen anymore. So I actually ended up developing a vibratactile floor. So it was a haptic floor that vibrates to the film. And I work with body percussion, so you made the body percussion film, and then you can feel it through the floor. And I think there's a lot of things happening now with accessibility and how many people are actually able to access the work that we make. And so for me, that was kind of like, I wanted to make that shift and maybe try and find a way to blend up the live with the screen in some way, and in a way, us getting back to this feeling of the work in some way. And so in London, there's now a lot of things coming up with haptic works and things that we can feel and touch alongside the screen. And I'm seeing that happen a lot more now. So even the floor itself is just an R&D phase, but yeah, I'm seeing things like that kind of happen, and it's really wonderful to kind of be a part of that. And I think a lot of people who've been making screen dance for quite a while are now thinking about those other things. But for a lot of people during the pandemic, it was their first film. You know, so there was a lot of kind of teaching going on and kind of going, okay, what is this for them and things like that. But yeah, for me, it's kind of now more, it feels a bit more like I want to be a bit more outward reaching and trying to think of how we can invite the screen into other spaces. And like we talked about, not necessarily inviting people into our space, but bringing the screens into their spaces. So yeah.
I have a lot of questions about your floor. Maybe later.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I attended Cine Dance in 2010. It's a screen dance festival in Amsterdam. And I happened to sit behind Katrina McPherson. I knew who she was at the time. I was a student presenting work quietly behind her. But while you were watching the films on these huge screens, you were commenting on the difference between standard definition and high definition.
Oh dear.
You were, but I took note because I said, okay, well, she's pointing this out, then this is a real thing. So it's interesting, this idea of generational shift and what resonates now, because at that time, I observed that production value and image quality or resolution was becoming a more dominant characteristic in evaluating good screen dance. And it seemed that if a project around that time was standard definition or low resolution, that became a barrier to it being seen or evaluated as meaningful. So now that the pendulum, and this came up a little bit earlier today, now the pendulum is swinging all around, and artists and curators and festivals are consciously utilizing programming and appreciating a broader range of production values and image resolutions and valuing all those possibilities. So I personally find that shift very exciting, and I feel like, Gabri, you've been doing work specifically in your festival. Is that right? Am I totally imagining this?
I don't know what you're going to say, so.
Well, just this more open-ended possibilities of what is a screen dance, who watches it, where we watch it, and kind of, Kara, what you talk about in your book of these make-fests and the hyper-localists. And I just think that's a really exciting development.
Yeah.
Can I comment to actually? Oh, sorry. Can I?
Yeah, go on.
It's so interesting that you remember that conversation, because that was a really pivotal moment for me. Because I remember exactly what it was. It was the premiere of There Is a Place, and it was projected on a big screen, and it was in a programme with other films. And There Is a Place was shot on my Sony Z1 videotape camera. And I loved my Sony Z1, and it was part of my body. And I went to that screening, and I thought, I can't work in this medium anymore because the work will not be screened at festivals because everything else had got digital and high definition. And I think that's it's a really interesting point to bring up, and I think it pertains absolutely to education as well, because, again, there's obviously every new technology brings new possibilities and options and possibilities and creative potentials with them. But they all are they have inherent qualities. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do when we're experimenting with screen dance, and I would include, a teaching environment as being potentially an experimental environment, because in my experience of teaching, I'm learning as much as the students. So it's partly about understanding what those technologies are bringing. So, for example, the iPhone is changing everything. It's changing how we think about things, look, how we use cameras, how we see the image, how we read the image. And again, I go back to intentionality. That's absolutely fine if that's what the intention of the work is. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that you need, it helps to understand that and maybe to be shown different possibilities. For example, what different lenses do, what different formats do, what different screens do. That's about showing, and then individuals can make conscious choices or not to engage with that. So I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. Again, it goes down to this thing of we can be talking so generally here that it's actually not useful anymore. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was really great. And just 2 points. My 18-year-old and her friends are buying cameras that you can use one time and then develop in the store, and they love it, and they love it because of the quality. And then they take a digital picture of this fuzzy quality, and they love it. And they're also buying older cameras so that they can go develop it. And also in the last 2-3 years, one of the biggest selling things is the record player. So there is a shift, and those are all people 18, 16, 18, 24 who are really saying, oh, 4K looks totally not natural. I actually don't see you in 4K right now, probably because after 2 years of Zoom. But maybe you like a little mystery, right? And so that's one thing I've really, really noticed, including in my class, in students looking for 8mm and wanting to experiment with that and the sort of physicality of the form. And I find that very exciting. And then, of course, there are all the forms of just showing your dance and selling yourself on social media, but we all know
that. This is not super formed, so I'm going to try my best. But I'm sitting with some of the past few comments, and Gabby, you're really making me think about nostalgia and also some of the dangers of nostalgia. I mean, I'm super into your kids getting record players and all that. And this kind of rediscovery of a way of looking that is now foreign because time makes things foreign. And there's a certain ahistoricity, a certain whitewashing or a certain pure aestheticization of the past, as though the past has no meaning other than how we can picture it or encounter it in these media. So I think that that's kind of interesting. And I'm thinking about, because Kara, you were talking about blowing up the curriculum, and a few people have mentioned that they are not fans of the curriculum. And I don't want to be the person who's waving the curriculum flag, but I also wonder, well, what are actually the things that are worth holding on to? This morning we were thinking about legacies and things that we were kind of re-encountering anew that surprised us. And a kind of responsibility to our own pasts that we maybe weren't prepared for. And so I also want to say that there's something there that's also different from nostalgia. And in terms of how we're thinking about generational shifts, how we teach, I do think that there is an invitation to reconsider, like, am I just teaching this because it's what I was taught, or because there is something that is deeply valuable in its transmission? So, bringing that sense of intentionality to the practice of teaching. But then also strategic forgetting. What can we actually let go of? What can we allow ourselves to forget or not hold on to? Because maybe that holding on is itself a kind of violence, or perpetuates violence. And maybe that letting go can make room for some new possibilities. And maybe those possibilities are going to come on, some teenager's reinterpretation of a Super 8 or even an oldie-timey VHS, to re-encounter that.
I just want to clarify, because I asked her about this and her friends. They like the waiting. They like the waiting. They like to read records and have a physical thing in hand that has nothing to do with nostalgia. They don't like the instantness of everything and that it disappears. And I was really surprised by that. So that's what's behind that.
Oh, I love that, because I think somewhere in something that's not even published yet, I said something about being in a time where waiting has become passé, and why I love snail mail so much.
Yes.
It's not, it has nothing to do with screen dance, it's snail mail. But anyway, and then you sparked something for me. So two things. One thing that I'm grappling with, and I wrote an article for Dance Magazine in February, talking to a lot of different dance companies and folks who are making screen dance and thinking about screen dance during the pandemic. And a lot of it comes back to access for me, in that now, like ABT and these big ballet companies are making screen dance. And they're like, hey, so now we're screen dance makers and this is awesome. And now we want all the grants, and those of us who have been making screen dance for a really long time, like, I can't compete with the New York City Ballet. And neither can any of you. You know what I mean? And so just thinking about the way that the field is shifting such that those folks who already have a pretty large piece of the pie in terms of funding and visibility and all of those things, they're coming around again, even though a lot of those entities are traditionalists in many ways, because they have had to adapt. They are adapting, and there's something to be said for the ways that those entities have the ability to take more than to give more. And I worry about that for my students, thinking about how they may want to be independent artists and what it actually means to be an independent artist in a post-COVID world, when already it was precarious before the pandemic, and now it is going to be even more precarious after the pandemic, and that the landscape of the arts have changed irrevocably, as everybody in this room knows. The second thing, you brought up nostalgia, and nostalgia, just because I'm like not fantasized, I can't talk, it's late. With it, I'm enthralled with it, is that it used to be a disease. Like, folks thought it was a disease, like an actual disease.
Nostalgia?
Yeah. And so much that, like, if you were in the military, because that's where they first identified it, they call it PTSD today, but like, they had it so that you couldn't hum certain tunes that would remind you of home, lest it make you a not so great fighter. And now it's just a market strategy. Like, so when you have your 18-year-old buying old cameras that in the 90s, we were like, great, I can throw this camera away and I don't have to carry around film. Like, what's vintage for them is money for somebody else, because what are they paying for those cameras?
Oh, that's great, yeah.
And then just to kind of connect it back to that, like when you're talking about this idea of nostalgia, the ways that it can be dangerous, in what ways are we catering to the powers that be that are like, hey, nostalgia's cool if you want to pay for it. And in what ways are we actually paying homage to a tool, a way of media making, and the people who paved the way for us to do what we do today?
Can I say something? I think these are all really good points. There's another aspect, I think, of reusing technology, and I think there's environmental questions, and I feel like moving forward, the environment has to be central to what we do as educators as well. I mean, it is certainly for young people coming into education, it's paramount and that most of their front of their heads all the time, as it should be. So I think I agree, nostalgia, but I don't actually think that old cameras are about nostalgia. I think they're simply cameras from a different era, and it's not just about the cameras. But I do think, because it's one of the worries I have about screen dance and the digital, is that we can never get away from the pushing constantly of renewing the technologies, and that is driven by capitalism, and it's anti-environmental. So as an art form, we really do need to take that quite seriously.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is. Doug, you could probably make a wooden television for us, could you?
I'm squirming in my seat. Is that what you called on me?
No. I wanted you to make
a page full of questions.
I now feel, can I do a plug? Moving Body, Moving Image in 2 years is around the body and the climate crisis. And I want to, and we decided this when I started it, with the student part in it. So start thinking, tell your students.
And make your wooden tellies. And make your wooden tellies.
Make your wooden telly. What does it mean?
We do.
Okay. I just, if you don't mind me adding, just think when you were talking about the direction of where we've gone, just really not really a statement except that all the problems from before, all the inequities are still there. I mean, it doesn't matter what format you're in. We're bringing, so unless we guide our students any differently or ourselves, you're just recreating the same problems as before. So they may be more technologically brilliant or, fancy with the digital. I mean, there's shows that we've watched because our TV's so good that I don't like watching. I mean, really, the surface quality is terrible. So you have to click it to make it cinematic or something rather than what it comes as. So, but anyway, that's not exactly the point. But it's just really that, yeah. But the eye can still be dazzled by really cool shots and drone images and things like that. But if there's no content, if there's nothing really unique about what's being said, it's the same as before. And the people who are saying it, the people who get to say it, unless you make space, it's the same as before.
I keep noticing how students now coming to screen dance, like in my screen dance course and dance and video course, they're sometimes forgetting when they film a project to switch to landscape because they're so used to seeing and working with screens and a portrait. And I'm just wondering if anyone here has experience, insights, ideas about this shift that I'm seeing from landscape back to portrait.
Get used to it.
I will have to share some really great, what we call vertical filmmaking links, and there's some filmmakers who started working with that, and that goes that we have to teach the history of why we have horizontal, right? Because it's how the eye travels, and then what does that do to the brain with younger students who have the vertical brain, what is left over, and then there are really some pretty interesting things that can be done with vertical filmmaking. So that's shifting, but there is like a language that's being developed around that, which I find actually interesting. I can send you the links, I have it.
Others?
I mean, it makes total sense, right? If you're filming a dancing body and you want to fit the whole body inside of the frame, you're not going to do landscape. Like that prioritizes everything else, right? So it makes intuitive sense in terms of why they're doing that. But then also if we think about what kinds of spaces people have had access to over the past couple of years, how people have understood their proximity to each other, both in the kind of intimate spaces of the home and then the like very far apart from each other in public spaces. But there's also, I just wanted to throw in terms of this kind of generational difference, I made that comment earlier about media fluency and craft. the people who are deeply invested in the craft of making dance on screen for social media spaces, it takes it takes so long to craft that. So you end up with like these kind of one-shot, quick videos, and then on the other hand, these highly produced things that, you know, for a 6 or 10 second film, it will take them a long time to create. So there's also a very interesting thing there in terms of the temporality, like the patience, so like Gabby, when you're talking about that your kids enjoy waiting, that has not been my experience, and how long people can sit and wait without having information change, the speed with which they want to be consuming things visually, which might not then carry over into like their physical practice. Like they're not moving more quickly, like the kind of more meditative movement is totally welcome and appropriate if it doesn't throw people into like anxiety because they can't sit with themselves for that long. So there is also that in terms of that generational difference in terms of what is the length of time that people can sit and wait and be open and watch, versus, you know, like even screening a 5 or 6 minute film feels really long when you're spending most of your time watching TikToks. Like the difference in the editing, the difference in the duration is just so profound.
Thank you. And that sound that we heard, despite everything being silenced on my phone in every way possible, signals us that to shift to the next topic. But before we do, I did want to mention to everyone in the Zoom space, as well as here in the audience, that we are going, after about 20 minutes of conversation on the third topic, we're going to open up this event for audience questions. And also, so for those in the Zoom space, you can start asking those questions now by putting them in the chat so that we have a list. And I invite the audience to start considering what questions you have for our panelists as well, so that when we get to that portion of the event, we don't have that awkward silence that happens.
We were just talking about patience, and we're saying we don't want to wait.
Not in this moment. So moving forward, I do just want to touch back on the mission of ACDA a little bit. The American College Dance Association acts as a national membership service organization to strengthen the educational network for students and faculty within the academic dance community. And as such an organization, we are wondering how can we as an organization facilitate, support, and advance the field of screen dance. And so it means that we need to sort of look at, I think, what are the roles of academia in supporting, facilitating, and advancing screen dance. What are the roles in academia, and what are its responsibilities?
I could start with that, seeing as I'm not from the USA. Thank you. I think it's a real potential here, because I think it goes without saying that things change very, very slowly. So finally, it may be that screen dance enters the curriculum, for want of a better word, of American universities and colleges in a significant way. It already is to a certain extent. And if that happens, there'll probably be certain things that need to happen in order for it to sit within the structures as they exist, because maybe everything can't change immediately and very quickly, even if that's what's wanted. So as that's happening, I think to pick up on what Cara quite rightly said, I mean, the screen dance as an art form has absolutely depended on the kind of passion and work, hard work of many, many people all over the world, many of whom are not part of institutions or have sort of bit parts or float in and out of employment and institutions. So I think if there's going to be more of a sort of institutionalization, and that's a horrible word to use, but if that happens, then is it possible at the same time for there to be ways of supporting experimentation, artistic endeavour, collaboration, so that the two things are happening simultaneously? Otherwise, for me, there's a bit of a danger that the university system, and not just in the States, because this will be happening everywhere, are sucking in all the time. And okay, they're educating, but it's in a very small circle. Whereas in an ideal world, that circle could encompass many other people and involve, and I don't know how that might happen, but I don't, and this is not, I'm not saying this is how it could happen, but for example, one of the things that happened in, I thought, a very wonderful way when we were doing the capstone course 2 years ago, or last year in Utah, and it all went online, suddenly it was possible for people from effectively all over the world to participate in the course. Okay, they had to pay money, but it wasn't massively expensive because it was online and it was a short course. And then suddenly there was dialogue, and I'm looking at Hannah because she was one of the students, and my teaching assistant. Suddenly there was dialogue between people who I would suspect wouldn't normally be having that opportunity to dialogue, but also work together as peers in a class. So I'm just sort of wondering, in a utopian way, whether that sort of thing is more possible, although I know how hard it is because you have to apply to go to university and pay lots of money. But, is there ways of having workshops, opening it out to local community, involving international people, artists, collaboration?
I'll go to that a bit.
Yeah, go for it.
I think one thing I've realised, especially when I've been teaching and guesting, is that I always teach dancers. I've never taught a screen dance workshop at a film course. And now I run a unit at my university where it's about cross-collaboration, and now we're inviting other courses to come into the fold. So we managed to get that collaboration with, there's a BA in virtual reality, and now they're coming to work with the dance students here, but it can be very difficult. And so, for me, it's all about, can we get the film students and the dance students actually together in the space? Is that even possible? Can we mishmash the curriculums? Because what happens is everything's so separated. Music is here, dance is here, film is here, but then when you leave, you have to collaborate with all of them. And not a lot of people know how to necessarily do that, and to kind of shift everything we've learned and break down that language to find a common language for this particular story. Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you for bringing this up. I'd like to hear more about that as well. Coming back to my notes. For the last question about future possibilities, and I think that relates to how we can support and advance the field, is that it really is about interdependence and collaboration. More curriculum with certificates, minors, and majors in screen dance built on courses, or virtual reality, built on courses that are cross-listed across departments or schools and possibly or collaboratively taught by cross-disciplinary faculty. And still, I look to screen dance at the University of Utah, and the BA dance major, the BA, I have my notes wrong, but Marymount Manhattan College has a dance and media focus as well. So these particular programs cross-list courses in dance and film specifically, so that collaboration is very valuable, and I'd love for us to have more support within the universities modeling for each other how to do that, having conversations with how to convince programs to come together. And then one other thought I have about, Katrina, what you were saying, that I would love for us to collectively rethink the research teaching service hierarchy attached to academic faculty tenure and promotion. So those of us lucky enough to hold a tenure track position can, over the course of a career, dedicate significant time and resource to supporting artists other than ourselves. And our circle of academic colleagues. And I wonder if ACDA could partner with other interested organizations to propose tenure and promotion guidelines for assessing dance faculty who are engaging with screen dance beyond authorship. So how can we encourage and professionally advance dance faculty when they serve as a producer, as a curator, as a fundraiser, as a facilitator for another artist's creation and exhibition. And I would like to see this substantial work acknowledged and would appreciate learning from you all during this week where and how this is occurring.
I love this idea. I think that, those of us who do work in academia, we can also go to our various professional organizations to advocate in that way for different kinds of labor to be recognized. We are such an awesome community. And because of that, we're also really tired. Because a lot of what we do is, as Anne was saying earlier, a lot of what we do is for the love. We're putting it in to support others, to help the field grow, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not just not compensated, it's also not recognized. So that's something that I think that you're really calling attention to. ACDA is such an interesting organization because it's specifically an organization that is related to colleges and universities. Like, it's very specific. And so I would wonder, what are things that ACDA can do that individual institutions cannot do? So the power of ACDA is that it brings people together. The power of ACDA is that it has this whole kind of adjudication framework. The power of ACDA is that it offers these workshops and kind of works inside of a festival context. And so I wonder if there are ways that ACDA, which I don't imagine to be a well-resourced, I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe they're rolling in the dough. In which case, then I think you have your answer. But if not, how can ACDA use the network that it has already cultivated to make things available, make experiences available, make training available through its membership organizations that our various institutions can't sustain, can't do. They don't have the faculty, they don't have the lecturers, they don't have the people with the knowledge. Maybe in some cases they don't even have the student body, but there's always that one student who really wants that thing. So I would wonder if the very fact of ACD having those kind of cross-institutional networks enables it to do something that, whether our various institutions are large or small, nevertheless it's hard to do inside of a college or university.
And you put that so beautifully, and Charlotte also loved what you said. The only thing that I would have to add to that at this point is thinking about the other organizations that are like ACDA, but are not dance-centered, like KCTF, USITT, where you're finding colleagues and students who are in the university setting who are doing things that would be helpful, right, to us as dance film creators, people who are interested in screen dance, as a way of looking at how they're doing their festivals and their conferences, who they're bringing in, how are they thinking about interdisciplinarity, and how can these different organizations that all run these kinds of regional and national festivals for college students and faculty just come together in creative ways to do what we keep on saying we've been dreaming of, And everybody knows somebody on one of these committees, I'm certain.
Others, I'm typing. I have ideas. You all gave me ideas. Others speak.
I can say something.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Made recorded job.
I would just, as words of encouragement, as you're over there working really hard, that I do think your initiative here, Chad, is answering this question as well by bringing screen dance into ACDA. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can take the mic. Thank you so much, Alice, for those suggestions and points to consider. I think we can make a transition to take some questions, if That feels good for everybody. I'm going to stop this so it doesn't make any more noise. So speaking of resources, other tips and ideas, we have a question from the ACDA membership, Mark Santillano. What summer programs would you recommend for filmmaking, and not necessarily strictly screen dance? Anyone?
I would suggest just working on films in any capacity, because there's something really, that doesn't answer the question, but just working as a gaffer or I don't know what on a film set is also really helpful. I don't know any summer programs. Sorry.
I teach a nice screen dance in the landscape workshop in Scotland in the summer. And I can do more of them. No, yeah. There's so much out there, it's hard to say, isn't it, in terms of film, but...
There aren't that many programs for screen dance specifically.
No.
So I mean, and I've been wanting to go to yours for like 5 years, and it just keep on missing it because life. But I also want to say that there are a lot of local film programs that are not even connected to universities. So for example, I lived in North Carolina for a long time, and the Asheville School of Film is an independently run film entity, and they give workshops all the time on everything from editing to script writing to cinematography. They bring in guest artists, and it's this really grassroots type of a space. And there are those types of film spaces all over the place, and they have offerings that are online and also in person. And it's just kind of doing a little bit of research on the internet to find what is available in your space. And because we're also used to being on Zoom now, if there isn't anything in your local area, you can definitely find something online where you can practice on your own, learning from somebody else. And also, I send my students to Film Riot, right? This is a thing on YouTube. These guys make all these like, hey, here's how you can do some film hacks with not a lot of money, but it looks really professional. Here's how we do it. And they're quick, they're engaging, students love them, and you actually learn stuff from them too, like things that you can actually use. So even though the internet is a really scary place, there's some really cool stuff there. And I'm always trying to suggest that my students go to what resonates with them. If a grassroots type of experience is more your jam, do that. If you want the Film Riot experience, do that. If there are books, Jennifer Van Sil has a beautiful book, Cinematic Storytelling, which I tell my students to read all the time. It's full of pictures and very few words, but it's really useful, right? And so, yes, there is a need on our part to have some development of more programs that people can go to. I don't know if Experimental Film Virginia is happening this year. It is, no?
I was going to say, mention it.
Yeah, so Experimental Film Virginia, Not a Shepherd, if you haven't experienced that. It's a little more on the expensive side as far as screen dance workshops go, but a lot of times people will find grants to be able to go, and I highly encourage that my students do that if they can find that. And yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, what else is there?
The International Screen Dance Calendar.
Yes.
Which is not by any means a complete picture yet, but the more people use it, the more people will want to add their stuff to it. So go look for workshops.
Mitch is giving a workshop.
Mitch is doing one.
Yeah, Mitch is giving a 6-week online workshop.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, I just wanted to really say thank you for that, because I think that brings back to still learning the tools of the craft, editing and everything else. And there's in New York, there's DCTV, local places where you can have workshops. You can, for a low cost, you can use equipment. They have mentoring programs, and that's pretty much free. The independent film school. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's important. And then you can bring your dance into it yourself, but you learn so much, I think, yeah.
Thank you so much. And that Mitch that they're speaking of is Mitchell Rose. I'm actually enrolled in that workshop. I can't wait for it to start. And Kara?
Yeah, I'm doing a little intensive at the end of April, like the last weekend of April. It's also my birthday weekend, so you all should take it just because it's my birthday, and it would be a great present to me.
Great. All right, so questions from the audience, and I think it would be good for you to be on mic if someone in the audience has.
Either one of us could repeat the question to on mic.
Okay, do that.
I will defer to other people who have questions first, but if nobody has any questions, I
Kelly
have
has
questions. Call on me.
Yes. Kelly.
My question is, I remember for a long time there was a lot of excitement about new media and virtual reality, and a lot of universities putting money toward that. And
Over here, actually.
Yeah, to stand in front of the podium.
I just wanted to ask about how departments, perhaps not in dance, but I know there was a big push and a lot of excitement about virtual reality and things that you mentioned a little bit. Is that where did money go there, and did anything come of that? Because I haven't, on my end, I haven't seen it sort of turning into a big quote-unquote producer. And then I wanted to say a couple quick things about one thing I think the institutions and the workshops I've done with people are really great for is having a collaborative group of people. So you can go and take these weekend workshops, but when I talk with filmmakers, I remember Bob Lockyer saying this probably 20 years ago in Argentina, dancers are the only people who only show their boyfriend or girlfriend and then get on stage. Like there's not that whole film production, watching, talking, mentoring, and I think that's I've found in the last couple of years especially that's really important to artists, so that we just started groups where artists talk to each other. Like I'm sitting in the room, but nobody needs to hear from me, they just watch each other's work, like we do at the workshops that Ellen led and Katrina leads, and I think that is what the institution offers, people and places and equipment. And then one quick thing about talking about time, what I've also learned is time is really different when you see something on a small screen and on a large screen. So we're programming and making stuff on these little screens, and then you get in a room watching it, and it's like, I mean, every second feels like 10 minutes. So I think when you're talking about understanding, not only framing, we have to teach people to understand that in terms of literacy. Do I have a question in that? Yeah. New media.
New media, VR.
Gosh.
What happened to
VR?
Yeah.
Big VR machines.
Yeah, this is just a personal take because I wrote an article also about VR and dance, and I 2016-17 worked a lot with it. Also choreographed for the Ashe film about Arthur Ashe with Brett Lichtenstein. We did that, and I choreographed the VR. And my take is about it's expensive, and if we talk about VR, this is totally my personal take, but I think it is not equitable. If we talk about the rest, it's really hard to work together with people, and when everybody has a screen on their faces, and it made me think about the history of film when we first were just looking in little boxes. Not we, I mean, I've never been in that period, but once we took that away and people could go into theaters, film became more popular. So I'm personally waiting for the VR for us to have a VR without that thing on our faces. But I think it sort of got stuck with the initial excitement, but then also the limitations, and then how expensive it is to really develop it and to have really good cameras, and then to learn how to use the cameras, develop the cameras, and then have up-to-date headsets that actually make you view the work that has been done. I think that's, I mean, we did a 7-minute film, and it was the amount of money that went into making it. Really, the small VR films is so off the chain. It's like, it's really expensive. Yeah.
I just want to say quickly that we have a lot to learn from the gaming community. They're doing quite a lot with making virtual reality more accessible to people through different ways, and we just haven't been looking at them. We need to play in their sandbox a little bit.
Yeah, and I also founded and I directed a movement lab at Barnard. This is a place for movement and technology, and we are working with motion capture, and then somebody like La Junée, who's working with black bodies in the screen, because a lot of the gaming is actually, gaming is still mostly made by white men, and then there is all that, but they're, not me personally, but there are people in the space experimenting with that. And there are motion capture suits that are not that expensive and accessible, and also kind of interesting software as well.
Yeah.
With kinetic and stuff like that. We just made a little film with like the motion capture software on the camera. I can show it to you. It's pretty interesting, but it's different. It doesn't push it into all that new technology.
Yeah.
But it takes a little bit of the humanness out of it also. So I'm not sure if that's why it doesn't go forward. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, in gaming it does. Sure.
Yeah, like even thinking of like the Xbox Connect, right? And like the infrared technology and stuff like that. And yeah, at London Contemporary Dance School, there's a big goal to kind of work with not just VR but AR as well, right? Two different kind of practices. But yeah, I think I'm very much looking forward to collaborating with this VR course, and hopefully more things will come out of that. So I'll definitely try and share what kind of comes out of that. But also, yeah, it's expensive, and it's also quite limited. Like we have 75 students, and so they can't all do it. So we've had to make it a choice where we split it into groups. So it's that sort of thing that kind of comes into play as well. But yeah, we're finding things.
I want to piggyback on that really quick.
I think that we're going to see in the next few years that it's going to get picked up. I think that things are becoming less expensive, and so I think we are going to see maybe more AR before VR, because I think we're already seeing that. And so it's not just the kind of challenge or the barrier of learning a new technology or having access to the equipment. But then comes the hard part, which is storytelling in AR and VR, which is a completely different phenomenon. And I do think that we have a lot to learn from the gaming community, because they figured out a lot of durational, experiential storytelling techniques that we will be able to benefit from.
I just wanted to piggyback on that, on the money issue. Because there's a whole group of people outside of the college situation that are making films, and some of them are actually doing it very well, and they're doing it without money, with no budget. Oh, sorry. So how do we talk about this in class? I know, is that a topic of conversation in Screen Dance? And I'm a proponent of, I love people, artists who can make stuff with nothing, can find a way to be creative. So I just wanted to know, are we going to shift to no budget films, or are we going to stay? It's very intimidating for me to listen to people talk about VR and all the money that's involved in a real production, but there's just so much work being made out there. So how are the two worlds marrying each other? Do you know what I mean? Or are they? Maybe they're not. So
I could talk to that. I think it's a really good point. I don't really want to talk about budgets or money or anything, because I think that is so variable in lots of different places and with lots of different people at lots of different times. But again, I go back to sort of, in a way, what the purpose of what we're maybe doing is a little bit. And I think one of the experiences I had last year teaching, which has really stuck with me, was in an undergraduate screen dance, online taught screen dance course. We were working with manifestos for creating screen dance. And it was a group of particularly undergraduate ballet students. And they wrote this fantastic manifesto where they talked about, in a sense, I mean, I can't remember the exact manifesto, but they talked about, it was about empowering them and giving them a voice. And I felt, reflecting on that, and how important that was for them going forward into the professional world, because more likely than not, they will be in situations where they're potentially going to be exploited in order for somebody to make their production. And so for me, rather than thinking about, how do you raise money, how much should you pay or whatever. It's coming a step back almost and thinking, well, how do we equip people to go out into the world and be empowered in a way that they're not going to be exploited, whoever they are, behind the camera, in front of the camera, both, whatever. That feels very important to me. And again, I think for me, that's what education's about. That's what sharing learning is about, is that sort of empowerment and understanding of the system in that way. It's not really answering the question, but that's what was triggered in me for that.
What Katrina said, totally could have said it. So, okay, yeah.
Thank you. And I'm reflecting on a couple of things. When we talk about AR, VR, new media within academia, again, I think our partnerships across disciplines will help to support artists interested in this area by especially working with dance science. I feel like at UCI, some of our dance technology is most utilized by our dance scientists for doing data collection around injury and wellness and these kinds of things. So also with like the NIH or science funding is on a much larger scale. So if there's partnership in the sciences or computer sciences or gaming that allows us to tap into other funds, that might lead to more sustainability in terms of new media and dance. And then just thinking a little bit about budgets, I wonder, it's really a question, but I wonder if there is value in more budget transparency, both within institutions and within individual artist projects, because the myth of what does it cost to make this work? What does it cost to run a dance program? That we could help each other collaborate to both understand what means we're working within, and then what our dreams and aspirations are.
There's something here for me that a maker makes at whatever level with whatever resources are available. So I don't identify as a maker, I identify as a scholar and a writer, but I think about, well, I write within certain word count, I write for, social media, I write for blogs, I write academically, I write for a general audience, I write for a specialist audience, and I'm always, attuned to those different needs, and that's part of my learning and training and doing and creating, is to be able to respond to different parameters and different circumstances. And I would think that being a maker is very similar in that, making for whatever context and with whatever budget. It's not that you can only be successful as a screen dance artist if you have $1 million budget. I mean, who has that? But really thinking about the kinds of questions that are driving the inquiry and the questions that can be answered at any budget level. And I think that this has been kind of a common theme, that what is the intentionality, and what is the being question first, because I think people overuse tech. I think that they have access to things and they think that they should use it, rather than, is this actually going to support me in my creative investigation?
Yeah.
Hi, I guess I'll use the microphone. Well, I just also want to respond to this idea of like the DIY artist who makes the work they can make. Sometimes when there is no budget, it's a luxury to make work if you have the time and you have all your bills are paid and you can make work. So I just want to also say that for the record. And my question for the panel is, what do you think the future of programming in terms of festivals is? Because we do have a real problem, I think, with barrier to entry in terms of fees. And some of that has really come to the front in terms of waiving fees during COVID. But now it's like, are we going to be in a hybrid world where we have people in the room together and we have Zoom access, which is amazing. It increases access for people who cannot get here. And also, as programmers, I know we have programmers in the room, is screening online for the foreseeable future really what we want for the field? Do we want that experience of we sit in the room and we watch the screen and we discuss it? So I just would like to hear from, I know I have people here who curate and produce So I'd just love to hear your thoughts on like what do you want to see, or what do you think we might see in the coming months and years.
To address your last question, I think, because there's a few things. The entrance fee are a problem, I think. We make an entrance fee $5 that can be waived, maximum $5, only because we got so many entries for people who didn't read. And it was very specific, so we said, oh, well, maybe we do if we do $5, then maybe people read. And that sort of happened a little bit more. So people think, oh, am I going to pay $5 to enter in your festival? I'm personally, I think being in a room is really important, and that's why I personally started as a one-day festival only, with not too many films, so that people could come together and create community. So part of it is also create community and have dialogue. However, the reason there's still an online component is because of accessibility, and that not everybody can get to the theater. Then we're thinking about aging populations, people with disabilities. This year, because it was around disabilities, I got some money to make everything audio described, because unfortunately, if I'm honest, I never really realized how many visually impaired artists still want to see screen dance. And then we were looking at who can poetically transcribe what people see. So we had extra cost. And it's still open till tomorrow, the festival. But even newer films all didn't have audio description, and then I didn't realize we would have it. So, but those things are a little bit easier online too, to make it accessible. So the online component, as far as I'm concerned, will still stay, if only to give people access who otherwise could not make it fit for physical reasons or economic reasons. Did that answer it a little bit, or?
I also want to talk about like what else is there. So
what else is there?
Yeah, like what else is possible besides I'm just curious what all of
Well, I don't think that the festival is necessarily the route to go. You can just like screen films for people that you want. Like, what is the purpose for being in a festival? I'll be honest, I submit my things to a festival because I'm in academia and I have to say what I have to do. And I stopped submitting to festivals after maybe 5 acceptances, and then I'll just give it away and people can screen it. But my institution does require creative publication, and if I show it to 5 people or distribute it, it doesn't count as creative publication. So that's also a little bit inherent in academia. That said, I think self-organizing films, sitting with friends to talk about films, I think is really important in a room though, because there's something that we've all experienced, being so isolated, watching by yourself a film and not talking about it, or even talking aloud while it's happening. It's also it's really satisfying to yell at the screen and stuff.
I'll jump in and say, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot with having artists work online as we have the past 2 years is the power that artists hold over their work, right? And even though we've adapted because we've needed to, if a festival and if all the festivals have been having stuff online, does that mean that there's more access to the work than the artist had intended, or ways of viewing the work that the artist had not intended, right? And so this is coming from a question of being a curator, somebody who's caring for the work that you are screening in the festival. And so I grapple with it because I don't actually have an answer right now. I think that there's something obviously to be said about the accessibility part, about people being able to see things that they would not otherwise be able to see, but also where are the artists in this, right? So do we make things so accessible that the artists no longer feel like they have ownership over the work? And so I think it's a tightrope to walk, right? Because you want there to be the accessibility piece. You want people to be able to see the work, but you also want to honor the artist's wishes, which do not always include having their work just online for weeks at a time, right? Even days at a time, without there being able to be like a paywall or whatever it is. Speaking to fees, I've always had issues with fees, but I haven't been in a situation where I didn't need them to produce the festival, which is also more of a systemic issue of living in the United States, where we don't have the kind of funding that supports these types of events as we wish we did, right? And so even if you're getting grants and things, the need for other types of revenue still exists. And then in terms of futures of festivals, I mean, I obviously write a lot about festivals. I think they're really important spaces, but they're not the only spaces. And I think there's something also to be said for being a festival that reaches out and collaborates with other types of people and events, and then reminding filmmakers that a festival is not the only place where you need to show your stuff. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is that I started going to festivals because I wanted to experience community around the work. And I think that that's still the central goal of any festival, is to, whether it be virtually or in person, to get people together talking about work, because festivals are not where we distribute our work commercially. They just aren't, not in screen dance. Festivals are not where we're going to get the types of accolades and things that may contribute to, a CV, an academic CV, right? I mean, it's nice when you get awards and things, that's always a nice feeling, but that's not why we go to festivals, and that's not why people put them on. And so, in terms of thinking about what's next for festivals, I don't know if it's a simplistic answer, but I would really just love it if people who are putting on these events are staying true to what they're passionate about and why they want to take care of work in the first place, right? Why they want to champion that work, why they want to put it out there, why they want to have people see it. And that means that there's going to be different versions of that, as there well should be, right? You don't want everybody doing the same thing.
Don't people like to have their work in festivals because they want a sense of belonging and they want to feel seen and heard?
Yes.
While he's coming up, I just want to add that, yes, and I see a future for film festivals where they can pay the artists that they program, and then the artists can pay royalties to the collaborators on their projects. And I just want to think about how there is no such thing as a no-budget art project. And at least sit down and write the hours that you put into it, and then consider, okay, I'm making this in-kind contribution at $60 an hour minimum, or whatever, 25, whatever, but yeah. There is no such thing as no budget art making.
I'm going to talk to you about that comment later.
Please do. I'm here through Wednesday.
Okay, a couple things. In my responsibility hat, we have to be out here by 7, and I don't want to keep the tech people later, so that's just something we need to do. Then I have a bunch of things, and I don't want to take up other people's time if there are other people who want to talk. One observation, this is just an observation, that this, I said to Claudia, this looks like the Screen Dance Last Supper. This is, beautiful. I want to say yes to everything everybody said. Absolutely, I want to be supportive to the diversity of opinions that we heard. The things that were put out in this conversation apply to everyone separately and maybe equally, I don't know. Everyone comes to Screen Dance with a different agenda, I think, for sure. Every university does, and I want to come back to the university. So everything that everybody has offered is useful in some section of some conversations, for sure. It's a lot of information. And it's also, I notice, as the conversation went on, a lot of sort of waves in the way that the questions were answered. And finally, I started hearing about, why people make work and who they want to speak to. But what I want to say is that I support all the questions, but the kind of questions that are asked often in the context of screen dance in situations where people show work immediately start with sort of formal constraints or instructions of work. How many pixels? How much does it cost? What shape is it? Things like that. What's the technology? A lot of sort of formal questions. And to kind of go back to the teaching piece and the pedagogy piece, or the curricular piece, that I think that we run the risk in universities, because there is a kind of sort of requisite budget for things, of fetishizing the newest, highest, best, quote unquote, best technologies, rather than starting with an empty space. And I've heard a little of this in the panel today, and asking students, why are you here? Why this medium? Why screen dance? What do you want to say with your body and your heart and those things that I would argue do cost nothing? I mean, this is what we have. This is our life. We have this life. And I know what you're saying. I understand. But I'm going to argue with you later. We come to these spaces, somebody said, to be heard and to be in communion with other people. And so if we're starting with that premise, then asking the question about, well, what's the best technology for that later? And also, this is a big observation, I'm jumping around a lot, but then asking, what is the means of circulation that most interests you? So if it's a festival, first of all, there's lots of kinds of festivals. And I want to also just say publicly that there are many festivals through film freeways, different things, which are not places where your film is going to be cared for, what Karen was saying. They're just not. They're something else. And that something else is we can talk about later. So if a student comes in to a course, in any kind of course, whether it's a workshop or a university course, if you hand them a set of tools, what they make will be the result of that set of circumstances. And somebody earlier said something about this issue has come up about sort of like low budget or no budget filmmaking. And I this is what I wrote down, that I use the word povera, but low budget filmmaking is not always a condition, it can be a choice. The surface qualities and the kind of, the way that a work resonates doesn't have to be a condition all the time. And so when we offer students 4K this or whatever that, that's going to dictate the way that the work is made. And if their aspiration is to the festival model, that's going to dictate the way the work is made. The duration of the work is going to be predetermined. You mentioned horizontal vertical. All these things are technological determinism. I mentioned it earlier, I think. They're conditions. And I think that if we step back, I would just argue that if we step back a few steps, before we answer, well, what kind of tools should we give the student? And have a kind of honest discussion about what the student is interested in bringing to the conversation, then we can build a curriculum around that. So I'll stop there. Go ahead.
I mean, I totally agree, Doug, but I think that's what we've been saying. And I think that if you ask anybody who's done much teaching anywhere, you never walk into a situation and there's a row of 20 4K cameras and 50 editing systems with, all fully updated. I mean, we teach with, I'd like to say with sellotape, I think that's the point. And I think that is the point of what we're trying to grapple with here, isn't it? It's taking it back to the body, taking it back to the individual, and intentionality. And the intentionality is the individualism of it. What are you interested in? What are you interested in? What am I interested in? What have we got to work with? Oh, I've got a pink pen. What am I going to do with it? So I totally agree with you. But I also feel, I don't know any situations where it starts with a camera. I just don't know, I don't find that anymore.
I think you'd be surprised at curriculum across the country, largely in dance departments, at how the opposite of that is true. And I don't mean to be criticizing, but I think that the original question is what I'm trying to speak to is the original, Chad's first question about curriculum, and I can't remember how you worded it, but I think that universities, many universities are in a very different space where, in fact, they do upgrade their technology regularly without question. They don't service old technology in universities. They get rid of it and they get new technology.
But then that's focusing on the technology.
It is.
What we need to be doing now is educating the educators. We are all educated educators. Anybody who, and you can learn through doing as well, so as in teaching. So it comes down to individual interaction. You could teach a whole screen dance course without one single bit of technology in front of you. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
That's what the starting point should be.
Yeah.
And, so you're right to bring this up, but I also get a little bit agitated because I think sometimes, because I always get agitated, but because I think sometimes that's where we trip up, because we start to argue about, do you need this camera? Do you need that? No, you don't need that. You actually don't need a camera. You just need people talking about stuff, engaging with it, and build it from there. So it's all about that.
If you have sugar in the cupboard, people will use sugar. It's just,
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think we've been. I think we've been saying that though.
Yeah.
I mean, we have been saying. I'm a little bit surprised because I do think that we're talking about, what you can make with what you have and how the students come. I don't know. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Did we not?
Right, yeah, and sometimes I'll say to my students, you know what, you can hire a camera operator.
Right.
You can hire an editor. We kind of train them to say, oh, do everything, learn everything about everything. There's color grading, there's all these kind of wonderful things that people are masters of as well. So, we kind of just learn the basic language, we can communicate with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the main thing of kind of going, all right, let's find a way to kind of converse that. But yeah, it's one of those interesting things, right? You don't have to do everything. And yeah.
Hi everyone. Most of you don't know me, so I will introduce myself briefly so you know who I am. And I will also preface by saying this is not a fully formed question, so bear with me. But I felt that it needed to be asked. I'm Pamela Crangill. I'm a film and media studies professor, which I know is uncommon in these spaces, which is probably why you don't know me. I've sort of made it my sort of career-long goal to make media studies, force them, beg them to pay attention to screen dance. And I'm only sort of 5 years into my post-PhD career. I'm at my second institution, and I think just last week my first critical studies of screen dance course got accepted by the, by university. Yeah, so I'm really excited to start teaching students a critical study of screen dance. And so again, this question might be a little bit left field because you're all leaders and really impressive curators, and you're on the dance and creation side of things. So my question is really about some of those larger questions about the place of screen dance in academia, in the university, its relationship with other fields, not just film, but also media, writ large. And I'm wondering, to the point of maybe cross-listing or collaborating with faculty and students in other departments, my question is really, one, how much success have you had with that? And two, if you have not had success with these kinds of collaborations, again, across fields, what are the barriers to entry, right? What can those of us over in the film and media side do more of to, what can we do more of to sort of, to bring you all into these other spaces that I know from experience can be very difficult to enter? Thanks.
I'm totally going to fight anybody else. I really appreciate this question. Also, congratulations on getting your course approved. I will say, I mentioned that I'm a scholar. It took me 10 years to offer my first Screen Dance Studies course. It will probably be another 5 before it comes back around. So, one barrier is there is some anti-intellectualism in dance departments, not all of them, but some of them. And that can be a barrier to just having the critical conversation. because people are so invested in the movement practice and they can feel really challenged by having to step back from the practice. So that's one thing. Another that is kind of a challenge to film studies, interdisciplinarity in the university, is that we're about bodies. And people are scared of bodies. And so I'm particularly terrified of dance. Like, we can handle bodies in the abstract, like maybe we can think about gender and race, but like actual physical human beings that move and do things, terrifying. And people often come into my classes terrified that I'm gonna make them dance. So I think that having dance in the title is terrifying. That is a barrier. Having an emphasis on embodiment in institutions of higher learning, that is a barrier. So there's some fear things that we just need to address in academia. But building those bridges and really engaging with critical discourses of embodiment, and also really engaging with critical media studies, like, let's actually talk about surveillance in screen dance. Let's actually talk about AI. You know, if we're thinking about VR, AR, let's break it down. You know, let's actually get in there in the tech and use that as a way in, because this technology is doing things not just to how our bodies are socially constructed and received and perceived in their datafied manifestations, but also have physical implications for how we move through the world. So that's what I would say about that. And thank you, and I want to talk to you more.
Oh,
So we have to finish. Yeah, 7 o'clock.
We have a little bit more time. If anyone else would like to speak to that question.
I could say something quick.
There is, and I just shut my computer.
I would just follow up to say that when I have had success co-teaching, it's been DIY, like approaching a colleague or 2 colleagues or 3 colleagues and just figuring it out, and usually doing that a quarter or semester in advance, and then making it happen that way, because whenever I bring it up to the formal portals, it's usually that the university doesn't pay for co-teaching or blah, 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 or blah, blah, blah. So then I would say the next step would be to schedule your class, if you can, at the same time of the person or course you would hope to collaborate with. Because then if they're during the same block, there's quite a bit that can happen. And then if you demonstrate success, then you can kind of come back to the formal portal and just say, we've got this, it's happening already, we just want to add it in the catalog.
So we have 10 minutes left, generously. So we'll go over by 10 minutes. We have 2 Zoom questions that I thought that they've been very patient. So the first one is from Olivia Soto. And they say, the panel discussed that we as artists try to create and aid as quickly as we tear down. What are key points that you would emphasize to the students of the next generation in screen dance? Additionally, what are key points or resources, artistic or technological, that every emerging screen dance artist must know from such successful artists in the field, such as yourselves?
The screen dance calendar.
Oh, sure. The screen dance calendar Zoomland was also just brought up again, just so you know.
I think that was Kara's.
Oh, calendar. Oh.
So let me get this right. The first part of the question was important points for students. Can you just say that again?
Oh, yeah, of course. So let's see. The first point was, what are the key points that you would emphasize to the students of the next generation in screen dance, in reference to that brief conversation we had like an hour ago about tearing things down?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I feel like I can never leave out of my teaching that are more philosophical than actually, because I don't really actually feel like I teach anything. I facilitate experiences, but I don't, I know what everybody else knows, so there's that. But you have to do what works for you. As in, there's no such thing as selling out. You gotta do your art the way you gotta do your art. And if that means that you do your art in a way that you can pay rent, do it. If you gotta do your art in a way that lets you have a family, do it. If you gotta do your art in a way that lets you live a nomadic life, do it. So I don't have anything to say that's like particularly revolutionary or, you know, tearing down systems means doing what you need to do, A, to survive, but B, to make the world one where it works for you, right? And it works for other people. I think another thing is that you just have to make and make and make and make and make and make and make. Like there's this idea that, you know, a lot of students have that, oh, did I do something good? Well, actually it doesn't matter. Not every moment warrants a masterpiece. Like sometimes you just have to like make something. And if it works for that moment, there will be other moments and you will make other things. In terms of like technology, what can you get your hands on? Like who has things that you can use? Who has skills that you can use? Like Amari mentioned, like you can work with other people. In fact, please do. It's nice to work with other people. You make friends that way. And we've been so lonely these past 2 years, like I'd rather make collaborative work than not. But there are no like perfect ideas or things to make with. There's only the winding path that is what it is, right? The winding path of being an artist, and anybody who teaches you know those students who are going to do it no matter what, and they actually don't need us. Just saying, like, if there's a person who's going to make art with their life, that is what they are going to do with us or not. And then there are those students who may need a little bit of encouragement, and by encouragement, I mean learning how to give themselves permission and to trust their own voice to do what it is that they are capable of doing. There's no magic in that. It just is what it is, right? It's not, I mean, you know, people who know me, I'm kind of witchy, I believe in magic, but like with this stuff, it's not magic, it's just life. I don't know. That's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, I just want to add to that is why we want to make screen dance and be really clear about that. Why is that the thing that you need to do? And not making a painting, just saying.
The second Zoom question is from Kirian Gorky Cueros. First, thanks for the sharings. I would like to know if any of you have any thoughts about the university's role in creating projects that enable people from the communities in which these faculties are inserted to have access to both technical knowledge, assistance, and structure to develop their own artistic projects, bringing together academia and the general population, including artists.
I'm sorry, I'll be really quick. But actually, this entire year, my students and I have been working with other community organizations, with visual artists, and through their work, through a organization called Curated Storefront. And they take over abandoned spaces in the town in Akron, and they do pop-up art exhibitions and things. And we've been making art alongside that organization as they've been exhibiting work, and it's been really fun, and it's been really nice to get the students out of the general way of thinking about, oh, we're doing a spring dance concert, we're going to make this insular piece and we're going to go into the theater. No, actually we're going to go outside, and before we make anything, we're going to look at these works, we're going to learn about the artists, we're going to learn about why they made it, and then we're going to make our work, right? So I think as long as people are willing to make those connections and make good on those connections, because we know that sometimes when we try to do connective work from the academy, it doesn't always work, but when it does work, it's really lovely. And I actually prefer to work that way. And this is not the only class that I've done that with. I mean, in other institutions, I've worked with, mental health communities and other types of youth and elder communities and things like that. Like, there's no reason why with being in a university with the resources that we do have, that it should be such an insular space. And if we think about the reason why universities exist, it actually should be the first order of business in a university to reach out and do community engagement.
Wasn't there, I was just thinking, wasn't there a book from the university to the real world and back or something a few years back? Anybody remembers that? I haven't, I will look it up.
I'm thinking of the book Art and Fear from Kara's earlier comments too, about just make the work that you need to make and keep making it, no matter what. And we could continue this discussion long into the night, but as Doug's already given us 10 extra minutes, and so we want to wrap up, I just want to say, send such a deep gratitude. Thank you, panelists, for offering your perspectives, your insights, your recommendations. This is actually a wrap for the 2022 National Screen Dance Festival. This is it, so we're happy to be doing it again next year, and we look forward to being able to continue to marinate in your thoughts and suggestions. Kim is making real-time notes here to the questions as you were sharing tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.